Hi, everyone. We're so glad you're joining us again on Writers Chat. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm here with my co-hosts, Melissa Stroh, Norma Poor, and Brandy Bro. We're here today to talk about fears we face as writers, because fear is a very crippling and real thing, and we want to be able to overcome that. So just in general, I just jotted down different things that we're afraid of, and you can put in the comments which ones of these resonate with you, or which ones, or if I've missed anything. And then I'm going to talk about fear in sort of a fear is part of being a creative person. And then we're going to talk about some other things too. All right. So first of all, fears. We may have the fear of failure. That's a big one for writers. We may also have a fear of success, which may sound strange, but it's a very real fear as well. We may have a fear of being not good enough. And then conversely, we may have a fear of being too good. And you might think, well, that sounds a little weird. But what if you get an opportunity to write for a market and you sort of turn your nose up at it? Because you think, well, I'm too good to write for that. But are you? Or is God trying to teach you something? Fear of technology. That is a big one. We see a lot of people facing that. They're just not sure what to do. Fear of marketing, fear of reviews, fear of disappointment in either ourselves or maybe even in others, if people don't respond the way we want them to or think they should. Let me see what else I have down. Fear of deadlines, fear of missing out, fear of burning out, fear of selling out. I mean, those are just a few. So, I'm sure you guys can come up with a bunch more, and we will be talking about those. But first, just to get us started into this and kind of laying a foundation, I'm going to be talking from chapter 1 a little bit from this book called The Artisan Soul by Erwin Raphael McManus. Now, I have only read chapter 1, and I mean, it was interesting, and I was really excited to see them when we decided to talk about fear. It was like, oh, I've just been reading about fear. This is good. Honestly, I'm not sure I'm going to read the entire book because it's a little bit esoteric, and it just, goes beyond what I'm really wanting to be thinking that deeply about these days. So you can check it out, and, it may be very helpful. I don't know. But anyway, I think there were some really some gems in that first chapter. He talks about the great divide is not between those who are artists and those who are not, but between those who understand that they are creative and those who have become convinced that they are not. And I think that that's a really valid point, that so many of us think that we're not creative enough to be creative. That there are some people that have been gifted with that and other people just have not. And if we're among those who have not, there's nothing we can do about that. So his whole point is that we all have this artisan soul that we can develop and can grow, and that we need to embrace. So we need to embrace our creativity and not be afraid of doing that. We need to be brave enough to call ourselves writers. How many of you have struggled with this thought of, when can I actually call myself a writer, without feeling like I'm an imposter or I'm being a fraud? It's something else that we're afraid of, right? So it takes courage to embrace our potential, because there can be valid reasons for not embracing our potential, because guess what? This is the way he puts it, and it's a little bit odd, but it's to be less, okay, to be less than what we can be means that we're responsible for less, right? Because as soon as we start stepping out and we take on, yes, I can do this, it increases the responsibility we have either to that creative task, or maybe to someone else, or maybe to readers or publishers or whatever. But as we embrace our creativity, we can find that we're responsible for more, and that can be scary. Again, we live in fear of failure, convinced that failure will prove us to be frauds. And that's a big lie. Failure, we believe, is proof that we are not creative. That's a lie. If we're going to take risks, we are going to fail. That's just a fact. That's a fact of life. Fear is the shadow of creativity. When we find the courage to create, then we are freed from those fears and that darkness. So we have to just find that courage, even though it's very, very scary. And I know that. I mean, I've lived it, and I still live it at times. The courage to embrace creativity means we will face risk and failure. Again, I kind of said that. To dream is to risk, and to risk is then to create. To create is to reflect the image of God and is an act of worship. God designed us with intellect and imagination, both of those things. He designed us with reason and with passion. And again, he designed us to dream, to take risks, and to create. The author goes into quite a few pages of talking about creation, the creation, and how God spoke and things happened, and God saw that it was good. He didn't say great, it was good. And that was good, And also that word sometimes is translated beautiful, which I had never heard that before, and I think that's really cool too. But God didn't speak Adam into existence. He could have, but he didn't. He formed Adam from the dust, and he breathed life into Adam's lungs. And then God beheld everything, and it was very good. And that's one of those things that, I know that creation, I've read that just so many times. And as I'm sure all of us have, we're so familiar with that story. But until reading this chapter, I'm not sure I had ever considered how God didn't actually speak us into existence like he did everything else. That our creative process, his creative process for humans, for people, was different. And it was breathing his life into us. I just get goosebumps thinking about that. It's so cool. So anyway, just to kind of close up this part, to pursue our greatest passions is to expose ourselves to our greatest pain. And that can be scary. In fact, that's something we usually do not want to do, right? If we choose to create, we are going to travel through failure. Nobody's journey on the writing path is free from knocks and blows. Don't ever think that. Even the person that you think it looks like their writing journey has been so easy, I promise you, there have been failures, there have been roadblocks, there have been stumbling blocks. To live a life of passion is to know sorrow. To pursue a dream is to invite a nightmare. That can be scary. To love is to know betrayal and loss. You don't have to be a writer to know that could be true. Our souls are fragile and they are tender, but they are also resilient and they are tough. So with all of that, we're going to talk about some specific fears for writers, but I just want you to be thinking about this, that God breathed life into you. He is creative. He is the creator. He is giving you that gift of creativity, even if a lot of people have told you, no, you're not. It's a lie. And I pray that you will embrace the creativity God has given you, the gifts he has given you, enough to take the risk and to create whatever God has given you to create. So that's the end of my little sermon. And now I'm going to open it up to my co-host to talk about specific fears or whatever you want to add to that.
Johnny, of course, I start to talk and my throat starts to seize up. Last year at Blue Ridge, I won second place for my article overcoming. Originally, the article was overcoming fear with faith, but it was changed to, I can't even remember, trusting my armor, standing behind my shield of faith. And that whole piece is about a situation that God brought about with one of my daughters that has borderline personality disorder. For those of you that don't know, that's a whole big mental health thing. And anyway, things were going to change, and it would, if it went the way things looked like they were going to go, I would have to give up writing, and a whole lot of other things. And I had just come into the realm of writing, and I loved what I was learning. But I was afraid that I would have to give all that up, and I didn't want to. And I finally had to come to the place where I just said, okay, God, you know, you've got control of this. If you need me to do what's being asked of me, you'll give me the grace. I want your will, not mine. And I surrendered. Of course, it didn't all happen quite that easy, y'all, just so you know. It wasn't just this, oh, that bothered. Oh, God, here I am. You could have it all. Oh, no. It took, you know, a good 30 minutes of crying and begging and, my God, please, and all of that. And, you know how it goes. When I finally surrendered, then I promise you, not even 30 minutes later, I received a call that everything was taken care of. That situation that I was so afraid of not being able to do what I really felt God had called me to do, that situation was taken care of. So fear is real. It's not something that we can, you know, God is bigger than anything. Don't be afraid. That is true, yes. But we're humans, and it's very easy to be afraid, whether it's writing or other fears that can impact our writing. So I've learned to realize, let me rephrase that. I have learned that we can't overcome fear with faith permanently. Mm-hmm. It's a journey. Mm-hmm. And we walk through faith. We persevere through faith. But I don't believe we 100% overcome it. That's one of those things that's always going to be here. It's going to plague us because we're human and we're stepping out in directions and taking that step of faith. So with that, there's always going to be an element of fear. But the difference is, do we let it control us, or do we take time to stare it dead in the face and see what it is, and then give it to God?
So that can be really tricky to do. And I say that because I had a really bad experience, and I'm comfortable sharing this on the recording, so don't worry. I had a really bad experience after my daughter was born, where my words were twisted by medical personnel and used against me, and they almost took my daughter from me. And she was severely ill with a valid medical problem that they were refusing to look at and consider. We ended up taking her to a different hospital, and they finally acknowledged what I had been saying all along was actually the problem, but not before the damage had been done. It made me distrust everybody, because the one group of people that I was supposed to be able to trust to help me help my daughter turned against me, and they used my words in ways that were never supposed to be used. That really impacted my ability to not just write, but communicate with anybody. I withdrew from everybody and didn't want to talk to anybody because it destroyed my trust completely. So I lived literally about 7 years in fear of saying anything to anybody, and definitely didn't want to be caught writing anything that I thought, because that was documented proof that anybody could take and twist and use against me. So it was really, really, really hard to even think about writing. And that's really tough when God has made you a writer. And I think there are times in our lives when we might face significant fears like that, that we just cannot stare in the face and try to overcome. That was something that was well beyond me. I was very broken. I was suffering from medically induced PTSD. And it took 10 years for God to heal me of that damage. So I would say, in those times when you simply can't stare fear in the face and it just is, and you don't know what to do about it, trust that God is who he says he is, and that he loves you, and that somehow he will bring you through. I can't look back at anything in these past 10 years with any certainty and say, this is what fixed it. This is what took away my fear. All I can say is the only thing that I did throughout that was keep trusting God, keep trusting God, keep trusting God. And somehow I am to this place now where I can write without fear that people are going to twist what I say. Now I have to admit, I am not writing nonfiction anymore because that whole experience made it difficult for me to speak from my experience and share personal experiences. But what it did was it allowed God to take that and transform me into writing for fiction, which perhaps that's where I've belonged all of this time, but I wasn't doing it before. So God can take the things that we are experiencing, all the fears, all of the things that we're wrapped up in and tangled about, and use them for good when we turn ourselves over to him.
Yeah. That's quite a testimony, and I appreciate your sharing that, because it is a reminder that sometimes it takes time. Things aren't going to be fixed right away, and Norma sort of alluded that too, that it just it takes time, and sometimes we have to realize that. I'm just sorry for that horrible experience, and I can see not wanting to write nonfiction again, but fiction's more fun anyway, so
It is. Although I am warming back up to nonfiction because of that space and that time. And in that time, God has allowed me to experience positive responses to my words that weren't just attacks. So sometimes you need time to retrain your experiences and to be able to offset the really bad negatives. They say that it takes like 10 positive statements to offset one negative statement. And that's, I think, really true. Sometimes it takes a whole lot more than 10 just to offset the one, depending on how bad that one was. But that time, if you allow time and be gracious with yourself, to allow God time to work, to put those positive experiences back in your life on top of the negative, to tell you it's okay, not everything is going to be like that, then that's the way to go. Just be gracious with yourself, allow time. Sometimes we push and think we got to get things done yesterday, or another feel it feeds into is we get afraid that we're going to fail God if we don't get to writing, so we got to get on top of this other fear we have. God knows it all, and he's not in a rush. He knows that we need to take time in some things to work things out, and he will do that. So we need to be gracious with ourselves in that.
Very good. Very good. All right, Melissa, do you want to share anything? Talk about anything?
Sure. Mine, and I apologize ahead of time for glares that you'll see on the screen. I didn't get the chance to print out the notes I wrote because I forget words. I get this tunnel vision thing going on when I'm on Zoom recordings because I have this ADD. And so I have to jot my notes down to get my brain focused. So apologies for glares that you'll get back and forth as I reference my notes. But yeah, what I had to contribute really kind of spurs off of and relates to what's already been shared, and that's the fear that I think that one of the things that we as writers often struggle with is unfounded fears based off of our personal traumas and life experiences, and a lot of that can stem from miscommunications or misinformation. But I think one of the biggest contributing factors that kind of compounds it all is isolation. And
Yeah.
for me, that's been a big struggle of late. And a lot of, I mean, I can't share my personal traumas on recording that are really have been affecting me of late, but I can kind of stem off and go to past traumas to talk about, to give an example of how that is. And that relates to the fear of imposter syndrome.
Mm.
And starting out as a writer, I struggled big time with imposter syndrome because past traumas always made me feel like I wasn't good enough, that all my contributions, my creativity always fell woefully short of what was required in the writing industry. You know, I always told myself my writing's not good enough. Nobody's going to want to read it. And here I am. I struggle with it even now. I mean, I have 4 books written, but none of them are published. And so that I can't call myself an author. I can't call myself a good writer because it's not out there. Somehow I've failed to get it out there. But these are all lies based on isolation. And the longer that I'm withdrawn to myself and not being out there and putting myself out there with my fellow writers, the more I believe those lies. And so personally, I think that, yeah, and you can already hear I'm already trembling because I'm talking about such a personal subject, but it's putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. And I think that's important as a writer because we need to have that community. And I think that getting out of isolation and fighting the misinformation, the miscommunication, and all of that, we have to go to 2 very important sources. And the second important source is reaching out to fellow writers and trusting them with our issues, with our struggles, and having them come alongside us to help us overcome our fears. But the most important, obviously, is seeking God first in that. And I think that if we fail in that first step, then we don't have the strength to go to the next step because we let our traumas overcome us. And so then we fool ourselves into thinking, like Brandy said, I can't trust people. They've hurt me too much. They've wounded me. I can't put myself out there because then I'm vulnerable again to that attack. And so I think that we have to come to realize the truths that God's put in us. And the first one that I always remind myself of when I'm in that struggling place is God is not the author of fear. And so anytime I'm facing fear, that doesn't come from him. That's from the enemy, or that's from myself. And so I have to come to God and say, this is attacking me. I don't know how to handle this. God, take it from me and help me to know where I need to go, where guide me, and ask for that wisdom from him. And then I think that he helps open the doors and paves the path to where you can get to that place to trust other people with your problems. It may take years. I mean, I can relate to Randy there. I have many years where I didn't go to anybody with my problems. And it took a long time to build trust back up to where I could confide in people with my fears, my imposter syndrome, or my, whatever. So yeah, that's what I have to contribute there for what it's worth.
That's why Writers Chat is so important. It's such a strong community, and so many times I've not wanted to be here for fear because I felt like I didn't belong. I'm not accomplished as a writer. I'm not officially an author yet, according to today's standards anyway. But this community keeps me going. This community encourages me. Writers Chat, not just the leadership, but all of you that are here have prayed for me through difficult times, just as I have prayed for many, many of you. And God is blessing Writers Chat. May not be, worldwide fame, although we are around the world. Thank you, Isabel. But he has us here for those who are here. We are here for such a time as this, to encourage one another, to build each other up, and to spur each other on. And Johnny, I'm so thankful that you all started this however many years ago, and that it's still going. It's still strong, and God's using Writers Chat in a very mighty way.
Well, thank you for that, because it really has been a blessing every Tuesday morning for so many years now. We had no idea. And we've had people come and go and come back. And it's just been great that, I wouldn't miss this really for much of anything. We all feel that way. We're just so thankful for each of you that comes and contributes and is part of this group. It's amazing. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So thanks to you all too. We want it not to get too big. And I think that's what happens. It sort of gets to a size and then people start filtering away and more people come in and, it just kind of does this, but we're at a good place and we really love that. We really, really do. So, okay, this has been, I didn't know exactly how this was going to go. I appreciate you ladies and the honesty and the authenticity you've brought to this, because I really didn't know how personal it was going to get. And I appreciate that. And I think we're just going to stop the recording and let that continue, because there are those specific fears I talked about earlier, but we can talk about those anytime. Brandy?
Yeah, before you go off recording, I wanted to note that Joe put in the chat, fear, false evidence appearing real. And also something that God showed me about fear is that fear works off the past about the future to cripple us today. But the antithesis of fear is faith. And so if we combat the lies of fear, usually there's a lie in there somewhere that we're believing. So if we combat that lie by attaching ourselves, finding what is the truth and grasping onto the truth, then we can hold on in faith to that truth and trusting God and work through that fear. And sometimes it's a matter of just keep holding on and keep holding on and keep holding on. But if we do, God does bring us through.
He does. And sometimes it just takes that courage. So I'm going to close this with just a little tiny story. It really doesn't have anything to do with writing, but it has to do with being afraid. Back in, I guess it was 2013, and my marriage was sort of falling apart. And I went to this little gift shop, and there was this little blue bird. It's actually sitting over there on my thing. There was this little blue bird, a little ceramic thing, and it had the words "Be brave" on it. And I thought, oh, that is so adorable. And I held it in my hand. And then I thought, but I'm not going to spend this much money on it. And I started to put it back. And this has not happened to me often, but it definitely happened that day, where this little whisper is just like, it's for you. And so I bought it. And it's my little Be Brave bird. And I really just felt like God was saying, it's okay. I am promising you are going to be okay. And now we're like 9 years later. I am so okay. I'm so happy. So my little Be Brave bird has shown up in at least one story and maybe two. It's in one of my novels. So, it's my little Be Brave bird. Anyway, next week, we are talking about writing grants and applying for grants. Am I right, Melissa? With Hope Clark. Go ahead.
Yeah, she said she's going to discuss the myths and facts of grants for writers. So she's got a pretty good thing planned, I think, and it's going to be fun to have her here. Thanks to Brandy for reaching out to her. So yeah.
Great. And
Johnny?
Yes, I saw it.
Sorry. Did you see it?
Yes. Do you want to read it, Norma? Someone asked us to read a quote that's in the chat.
Sure.
So Norma's going to read that quote for us.
Joe posted this. It's a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, which she said, "You must do the thing which you think you cannot do. That should inspire you to know that you have the ability to overcome fear and that God is on your side and wants to fight for you and give you the strength you need to overcome."
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Joe, for sharing that. That is a great way to end this. And we do hope you come back next week for applying grants with Hope Clark. That's going to be amazing. And thank you for being here. Everybody else, just stay in your seats, stay tuned. And everybody else, bye-bye. See you next week.